From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
On this edition of Kansas Week, the fifth inmate death at the Sedgwick County Jail has the KBI investigating. Also, Governor Laura Kelly is taking a stand on the president's deployment of National Guard troops to fight crime in major cities. But first, a violent holiday weekend rocks Wichita, leaving 3 people dead. Did a critical failure of surveillance cameras hamper one of the investigations? We'll discuss these stories and more right now on Kansas Week. Hello and welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cerullo. A violent Labor Day weekend in Wichita leaves 3 people dead and several others critically injured in 3 separate shootings. The violence began early Monday in Old Town, where a 23-year-old man was killed. The investigation was initially hampered, according to the Wichita Eagle, because city-owned surveillance cameras in the area were not working. But Wichita police say they have now arrested a man, Lafayette, Washington, for suspicion of first-degree murder. Another shooting on Labor Day was the result of a dispute outside a North Broadway liquor store. That left 1 man dead and 3 others wounded. Hours later, another shooting near 21st and Arkansas killed 1 man and left another critically injured. Here to discuss this and some of this week's other big stories, we have a full panel. Sedgwick County Commissioner Jeff Blubaugh, former Wichita Mayor Brandon Whipple, former Goddard Mayor Hunter Larkin, and former Wichita mayoral candidate and community activist Brock Booker. Thank you all for joining us today. Mayor, I'll start with you. You're no stranger to talking about crime, and it seems like crime in Wichita has gone up significantly in the last couple of years. What's your take on this?
So, we really got to look at the data as far as, not to sound like a nerd, but as far as what's causing crime and what's changed. I do know that when Jeff and I were on the Wichita City Council, we made some really historical investments in crime prevention programs that were operated by nonprofits in the community. I think last time I checked, there were about $5 million worth of programs that we worked hand in hand with the nonprofit community that were supposed to help us, particularly with youth violence. Right now, the last time I checked, I think the current budget has less than $1 million in there. So I think that one of the problems is going to be not just policing afterwards, but also is the more we could be doing with prevention, and can we go back and figure out what worked last time, a few years ago, really well, so that we can at least get those programs invested in.
Yeah, and Brock, let me move over to you. I think the overall discussion here needs to be about the crime rate in Wichita. Obviously, we had 3 serious situations this past holiday weekend,
Sure.
But what is your take? Do you feel like in Wichita that the overall crime rate is increasing?
Most definitely, Jared, and there is definitely an uptick all around the city. And I think that we've got to do more, in the way of getting more community buy-in. I think when I pass city recreation centers, many times they're closed in the evening or throughout the summer. If they could be opened up for open gym, basketball, weightlifting, things that can improve or solve some of those things for our youth to do.
Yeah, we hear this all the time from our young people that there's nothing to do in Wichita. Commissioner Blubaugh, let me move over to you. You were on the Wichita City Council as well. The city of Wichita has a relatively new police chief. Do you think he's tackling this problem well, or how could he do it any better?
When we look at the data, the overall crime stats, I do believe that things are moving in the right direction, but what spikes it right now is these violent crimes, and you don't look at all the trends and you realize we have too much violent crime. And what is happening, it's the young people, it's the teenagers. I heard the DA Bennett speak here at a function here recently, and he talked about, I would like to try a case where it's just a couple 30-year-olds get into a bar fight and somebody shoots, you don't hear of that. It's not a couple 30-year-olds. It's teenagers. It's people that should not have guns in their hands to begin with. And that's where we've got to focus the attention. What's the problem there? What's going on there with that young demographic resorting to violence?
Are there enough community programs out there to help figure this out?
Probably not. And I do believe that, the county, we've got some responsibility with some of the juvenile detention, some of the process that we have right now. We've got to really focus on, I think that is the biggest thing we can do to control some of this element.
Former Goddard Mayor Hunter Larkin, what's your take on this?
Well, we didn't have that many problems in Goddard, of course, small town Goddard, America. But after I left Goddard, I moved downtown at the old Eaton Hotel building. So I've been downtown for 2 years now, and I do see that things are getting a little bit worse. And remember the old 1980s commercial where the guy put a little butter in the pan, and he lifts it up an egg, and he says, "This is your brain." And he cracks the egg in the pan, and he says, "This is your brain on drugs." Well, I don't know what's causing all these problems, but there's something going on with the brain. Some things affect, for you to pull out a gun and shoot somebody, you're not thinking right. Something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong.
And I remember as a young reporter when I started reporting in Wichita in the early 90s, the gangs were taking hold and the crime rate was skyrocketing in Wichita in the early 90s. I don't think we're at that point, but I'm still in the news business, and I'm certainly hearing of shootings and stabbings almost every single night.
It's scary.
Brock, anything to add?
Well, it's interesting. I don't always go to Old Town, but you hear about different club shootings, issues there. And there's been many things that the city has put into place in the way of cameras, officers on different horseback. It's like, do we really have to go to all of these measures? Why can't we all just, find a way to behave?
Get along, yeah.
Hate
to quote Rodney King, but get along, yeah. All right.
But,
go ahead,
Sorry,
Mayor.
I just want to add, because I think the mayor made a very good point about mental health, and also what my colleague Blue Ball talked about the age of some of these people. Teenagers, and we know this now, your brain isn't fully developed until you're actually in your 20s. So what we have is young people who have less opportunity to jump into these programs, as Brock mentioned. And frankly, we're seeing a rise in mental health. We're seeing a trend with some of these young folks, and sadly we're seeing access to firearms, which these young folks, and I agree with my colleague, that shouldn't have access to these firearms.
You have to think that the fentanyl crisis has something to do with this in here somewhere too,
Well, organized crime, I think, allows for much more weapons to get out in the streets, whether they're stolen from cars or from some of these other opportunities that are created when you have people who are not responsible or even criminal. But I just wanted to highlight some of the comments that were made. I think that's something that policymakers should be taking into account.
And the debate over how to best fight violent crime is now at the center of a new fight between the nation's governors and the White House. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly is among a group of Democratic governors who are pushing back against President Trump's threats to deploy the National Guard into cities like Chicago. In a joint statement, the 19 governors called the president's actions, quote, chaotic, federal interference, and an alarming abuse of power. They argue that the president is trying to undermine their authority as commander-in-chief, setting up a major constitutional showdown. Brock, I'll start with you. This is, this seems to be interesting because a federal judge actually ruled that President Trump was wrong in violating an 1800s law regarding posse comitatus, I believe, And so tell me your thoughts on the National Guard being used.
I believe in the rule of law. However, there has to be a basis, a rationale, first when you enter into a certain territory or city. And you want to get consent, I believe, somewhat from a governor, from a mayor, before you just show up and for whatever reason.
Do you think President Trump is doing that?
Somewhat. But I'd like to hear what the others have to say maybe first. But
Gavin Newsom might disagree.
Yes, he's got a different feel on it all,
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Commissioner Bluebog.
You know, I don't know that we need the National Guard here in Wichita, Kansas, Sedgwick County, Goddard, any of our local area, but I do believe there's more we can be doing, and some of the initiatives we worked on whenever I was on council with Mayor Whipple is the real-time crime center, getting cameras out there. We've already heard one story where we had a failed surveillance camera out there. I went down to Fort Worth, Texas here a couple years ago. They have 900 cameras all over Fort Worth, and it really, officers can't be everywhere at the same time, but you know where the hot spots are, you know where the shootings are, you know where the violence are. At least we can get someone quicker there and start to monitor those areas. And I do think the real-time crime center is a step in the right direction rather than deploying the National Guard locally.
Yeah. Mayor, tell me your thoughts on deploying the National Guard.
Well, I don't understand why Lady Laura is so concerned about Trump when she's dumping 66% of her Department of Corrections people. Is that correct? You were the former mayor. 66%, I believe, is getting dumped here in Wichita that she's picking up throughout the state.
Prisoners, former prisoners that you're talking about being released from their sentences.
So, I mean, we're talking about crime, we're talking about problems. Well, let's focus on our community. These problems are not problems, political problems. They're problems that you need to be in the streets, you need to be fixing these problems, and you need to actually care. So quit making it about politics, fighting with the Donald, okay? Fix the problems.
So is President Trump's strategy going to work?
Well, it looks like it's working in D.C. Now, I'm not advocating that we bring in the National Guard into Wichita, but sometimes when you're the strong man, you get things done. So.
Well, let me just kind of piggyback on this, because we had situations where there were conversations about would we need Guard troops when I was mayor, and former police chief told me, frankly, that they're not interchangeable, and that it almost feels like we're not giving the full respect to police officers and the amount of training that they go through when we just assume, or policymakers assume that you can interchange a reservist or a National Guard with a police officer, especially in Wichita. And we're not sending the Guard to Wichita, I understand. But cities like Wichita, we have the highest level of training for our folks. We have the best training for police officers. That was one of the issues when I was mayor, is if you were in Goddard, you couldn't, as a police officer, you couldn't just transfer to Wichita. You had to do more training. So, policing is its own science, its own art. And I worry if we think that someone with more of a military background is going to be able to just step in there without training.
And there have been discussions about what you just said, the militarization of police over the last 20 to 30 years to begin with. Does this look like, there has been the argument said that this looks like federal troops are occupying our communities? Would you agree with that, Brock?
I would like to see more of how this plays out, but in some cases, yes. In the situation that was in LA, where Marines were called up to our public streets, and again, what is the basis, the full rationale for when federal troops are called in to surveillance and police our own people?
And the basis there was to help with immigration issues, and then the argument was, well, you're taking away our labor from the farm fields and the hospitality industry, and it's definitely a sticky subject for sure. We'll move on to our next story. The Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office is investigating another death at the county jail. A 63-year-old inmate was recently found unresponsive in his cell late Tuesday night and was later pronounced dead at a hospital. The Sheriff's Office says the preliminary evidence indicates that the death was a suicide. The man had been in custody since June for charges including aggravated assault. This marks the 5th in-custody death at the Sedgwick County Jail this year and has prompted an investigation by the KBI. Commissioner Blubaugh, I'll come to you first then as part of now, since you're at the Sedgwick County Commission and have oversight of that area. Tell me your thoughts on this here.
I really can't comment on this specifically. It just happened. It's under investigation. But I do know anytime we have an issue like that, the sheriff calls in an independent organization. The KBI is investigating this right now. Anything outside of a natural cause death in the Sedgwick County Jail is investigated by a third party. I'll wait to hear the findings from that, but we do hate to see that, and it's happening way too much, unfortunately, and we've got to ensure everyone's safety, and I've been through the jail with the sheriff. I think he does a good job there, but there's a lot of violent people in the Sedgwick County Jail.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but the story said we've had 5 deaths at the jail so far this year. Do you know how that compares to previous years?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know historically we've all known that there's been a lot of violence in there. I don't know specifically year over year, but it does seem like it's increasing. But I really haven't. I guess I haven't heard of anything singular or any kind of root cause that, hey, this particular action's happening over and over again.
Yeah. Brock, does this bring up an issue of maybe being understaffed at the jail?
Always, always staffing issues, and I think about kind of in the previous conversation, why not is there more peer support in mental health care services that can be used inside the jail, the facility. It has some overtones of the situation with Sedgwick Lofton a bit, in some ways, but you never know what all the facts are. Right. So that's why we have to wait until the courts and things do their job.
Yeah,
I do believe Brock brings up a good point, because once we get the mental health hospital open, probably 75% of the people in there are going to come out of the Sedgwick County Jail, because a lot of the people in the Sedgwick County Jail should not be in jail.
They should not be
They
there.
should be in a mental health hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. Mayor Whipple, tell me your thoughts.
I mean, I don't know the details, obviously. My governmental spider senses are similar to Brock's instincts here about, first it goes to staffing. Are we fully staffed? Do we have appropriate cameras or visualization of what's going on? I do agree that we, sadly in this country and in Wichita, especially until we get our hospital, one of the biggest suppliers of mental health aid has been jails. Yeah. And it's the most expensive way to deal with folks who are in a mental health crisis, and it is the worst way as far as outcomes. So my thought goes to, and I have nothing to base this on yet, it's just instinctive, that we probably got to look at staff and also procedure. Did something happen where someone who was supposed to be watching got distracted with a different situation? Luckily there is a party that's a third party that's going to do the investigation, come back with the facts, and I think that our county commission, who's I think you guys control the sheriff's budget. Sheriff, but you guys control the budget. You might have to attend some needs. But
Hunter Larkin, tell me your thoughts.
Well, I think it gets back to the mental health issue, but what's the causation of the mental health? Primarily it's drugs, right? We have a problem in our town with drugs. We don't need them on our streets.
Not unlike any other city in
not
major
like
city.
any other city, but we have a problem, right? And you got to start at the root cause to fix the end. Now, do you abandon the rest of the game plan? No, but you also have to start looking at the very beginning. So.
Yeah. All right. New federal rules are now in effect that could change where Kansas gets its power and how much you pay for it. The guidelines limit future tax credits for green energy projects. While Evergy says it recently approved solar farms will still qualify, the future for new renewable projects is now less certain. The tax credits were designed to make solar and wind power more cost competitive with natural gas. Now, consumer advocates are worried that utilities may shift away from renewables, potentially relying more on fossil fuels in the future. Hunter Larkin, I don't think this is any denial that this is a trend of how the presidential policies are going nationally with Donald Trump's agenda.
Well, clean coal seems to be doing pretty good. Oil is doing pretty good.
Is there such a thing as clean coal?
Sure there is. The coal plants are doing better than ever, actually, the way they operate and everything. The oil business is pretty good. Solar, I got no problem with solar. Now wind, it doesn't seem to be pretty effective. You have to subsidize wind heavily. But ultimately, we need more power. So whether you put a solar, you put a coal, you do the oil, I don't care. We need energy, and I'm all for producing what type of energy we can get.
Mayor Whipple, the thing that I want to make sure we talk about is how this affects the consumer, how this affects Joe, average citizen, who has to pay for the electricity. And Evergy, no matter what happens, it seems like Evergy is always raising rates. They've had a rate increase every year for the last 25 years, sometimes twice a year. So how does this affect the average consumer?
So, I mean, first of all, it's never been more expensive to be a Kansan than it is today. The cost of everything's going up. And the tariffs aren't helping. And I think that, we're seeing consumers who are getting very upset. We saw that in the last election, but it hasn't gotten much easier. When it comes to energy, we're also using more energy today than at any point in our history. We're talking about not just lighting up your house, but also with AI and different technology that's coming online. So with that said, you gotta have an all the above approach to producing energy. And in our state, if there's a way to lower the prices because you have flooded the energy grid with energy and it's coming from solar, we should be doing more of it. Wind energy, if there's a way that we can make that even more profitable, then I think that those are ways that Kansas can get a piece of the pie when it comes to that energy market.
Brock Booker, tell me your thoughts. Do you agree with these federal guidelines that are seeming to push away cleaner, renewable energy sources?
From what I'm understanding, they're still going to allow those solar panels and things to come online with the new legislation. I know I'll take some slack from my conservative friends, but I am a fan of renewable energy and alternative sources of energy. I think we need to have a holistic approach when it comes to keeping cost at a minimum, if you can say that, or at bay for the average consumer, and then just as for globally, how we're being more effective in the energy and how much we are using.
Yeah. Commissioner,
right now Sedgwick County has a moratorium on
right.
having any more solar out there. And when I look at the model, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, it needs to stand on its own two legs. It can't just be built on subsidies. But some of my frustrations in the business models I've seen is it's to generate power to sell to networks outside of our area. And that's a frustration to me, where you're asking us for a subsidy and then you're going to sell power to somewhere else in the country.
Or even solar farms that pop up in far southwestern Kansas, and they're shipping that electricity to eastern Missouri. It's not getting used here.
Doesn't it have to go into the grid, though?
No, not that I know.
Pretty sure it has to go into the grid.
A percentage of it.
Yeah,
Sure.
but not all of it.
But there are some areas where solar works.
Absolutely.
Well, the zoo.
Yeah.
You guys put panels up?
We need to move on to our last story now. A new lease on life could be coming for Wichita's former downtown library. The city now moving forward with a plan to turn the first floor of the long vacant building into an event venue. The Wichita City Council approved $2 million from the transient guest tax to fund the necessary renovations. The move paves the way for the space to be used for weddings and corporate events after an earlier proposal to use the building for a police headquarters failed to gain support. Is this, I'll start with you two over here since you were both on the Wichita City Council. Is this too little too late? Last I checked, there were at least 15 to 17 event venues already within a 1 or 2 mile radius. How is the city not already trying to invest in a saturated market? Yes, I get that we're trying to do something with a vacant building, and a very important vacant building, but is this too little too late?
So I think it's never too late to take action on something that needs to get done. We have to do something with this building. I am not against it, trying it out as an event center, because what you want to do in public policy is, if that doesn't work, well, what else could you do? What's next idea? I was against the idea of turning it into a police station for one of the reasons is it's all glass. Like, we don't want someone shooting into it. But also, it's kind of because it's all glass with the books out, if you've been in it recently, it's kind of a cool building. So it's supposed to, you want public policy to make sense when you do this type of stuff. And you do have, you have the Century 2 over here. You have hotels over here. If you have that library and you can make that useful with visitors as well, and take advantage of the parking, it might make sense as part of the mix there. But I haven't seen the latest studies on it.
Commissioner
When
Blubaugh.
Mayor Whipple and I served together, we put out RFPs. We tried to bring in different ideas. And I'm okay with testing the venue idea. The thing is, I don't want to see any major modification to the building until we figure out what we're doing with Century 2, what the future of the riverfront is. I just wouldn't want any drastic modification to the building.
Let me ask both of you this. Local watchdog Celeste Ressette wants to move Visit Wichita into the upper floors, which she says could save the city millions of dollars. Tell me your thoughts.
My thoughts are Visit Wichita already spends a lot of money that comes in through the T-bid and through the guest transient tax, and if there's any way we can lean that out and ensure that we're spending that money to generally promote Wichita and bring Wichita here, I'm up for any of those ideas.
I mean, Celeste has been saying that for a long time. The reality is, if you look at where Visit Wichita office is out of, it's as big as this room maybe. How would that make sense to give them an entire library if they have like 3 people in the office? So, like, I get it. And I think what she's trying to do is to bring some of that local tax money back into a local building. But a more practical idea, but also I think kind of the silly one would be, why don't you just move them into the current library? They only need a few rooms, but the idea of giving them the whole upper floor of this huge building doesn't seem like a good use of money.
In about 30 seconds, Brock, as a community member, what do you think about this idea?
I think that we've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. However, I think we need an approach that we've got parking coming online in downtown. We need to finish the job there first and make sure that that's running smoothly, effectively, before we dive too heavily into finding out and let studies run on what the venue would be best served.
Hunter Larkin, 15 seconds.
If you develop things, you have to have a clear vision on where you want to go, what you want things to be put in certain spots, right? So the only thing I recommend to county, city, is y'all got to be on the same page on where you're going.
All right, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you to Jeff Blubaugh, Brandon Whipple, Hunter Larkin, and Brock Booker for being here. We'll see you next week.